What's going on, folks? Adrian here. Welcome back to the channel. The Elder Scrolls Online's Wrathstone Dungeon DLC is now on the PTS, and this is a first for me. I actually jumped onto the PTS to check out all the new stuff, and I am pumped about the new content coming up for ESO's Season of the Dragon, a year-long cohesive narrative-driven content schedule that revolves around dragons, the Elsweyr chapter, the Necromancer class, and much more. So if you haven't heard about the year ahead that ESO is going to have, check out the video link on the top right of your screen right now on that card and get caught up with all the news. So I wanted to share some thoughts and experiences as spoiler-free as possible about the two new dungeons from the Wrathstone DLC to give you folks a little taste of what's coming if you don't plan on checking it out on the PTS or if you haven't watched videos of it already, which I'm sure most of you have if your main game is ESO. So really, I wanted to see just how important the dungeon story was and whether or not ESO meant it when they said the story is all interconnected between DLCs and the upcoming chapter. So I'll talk about that later on in the vid, especially on whether or not you have to do the dungeon DLC in order to enjoy the prologue to Elsweyr and so on. So let's start with the Frost Vault dungeon located in East March. The lore here, and for both these dungeons really, is all about the Wrathstone tablet and uncovering the backstory of how it ended up in the hands of Abnor Tharn. You begin your Frost Vault adventure by bumping into a familiar face if you've ever done the Vollenfell dungeon in Elkir Desert. Thornya is back and is in charge of an expedition to reclaim one half of the Wrathstone tablet, and you've arrived at the right time to help her out. Frost Vault is an ancient Dwemer ruin that is inhabited by goblins and all kinds of baddies now, some dormant for ages, now awake again, which will be fun to encounter, trust me. So there's 5 bosses in here for your 4-man dungeon group to take down on both normal and veteran difficulty with hard mode. I'm not gonna go through each of the bosses and detail their exact fight mechanics for the sake of keeping this short and as spoiler-free for you as possible, but I will pick out and highlight a few interesting fights that I have experienced. One such boss is the Vault Protector, the 3rd boss of the dungeon. Leading up to him and right before the fight, you'll encounter these laser traps in the corridor, and that's your hint for what's about to come. The Vault Protector, for the most part, is just having the tank hold aggro in the middle of the room while everyone else burns him. At certain intervals, he goes down under a protective dome, which is when the Searing Ray Trap mechanic is activated. A line of laser beam will move toward the player from one direction of the room to the other end, and the only protection against it is behind the boss's protective dome, which is why it's best to keep him in the middle. This is definitely the most important thing to look out for, and if you don't burn him quick enough, all sides of the room will eventually send laser beams out, and then it becomes one hell of a dance for you. What makes this fight trickier is the adds, of course. There's 2 that will spawn dwarven spheres and spiders throughout the fight, and the spider you need to watch out for because they will stun you, making it harder to get to the protective dome during the Searing Trap phase. This fight was rather fun for me. I do like mechanics like these, but the last boss of Frost Vault is just something else, man. So let's talk about that. The last boss is the Stonekeeper, and before you get to him, you're introduced to the most important mechanic of this dungeon, which is what PTS are calling the Skeevatron Rat Maze. All 4 players will get to control a Skeevatron and will be transported below and learn how to discharge energy. Your rat has abilities, but the standout ones are the first ability and the ultimate ability. Simply charge your ultimate by spamming your first skill at the big lightning ball thing in the middle, then follow the arrows on the ground to the objective to use your ultimate. Get used to this mechanic, guys and girls, and all 4 players need to contribute here, so it's better to split up and each player go a direction to make this quick. Once the boss fight starts, it's all about taking down his weaponized arms before you can hurt him, and there's 3 phases here, spawning all kinds of crazy stuff from centurions, traps, spitting AoE of death, and at certain health percentages, both of his arms regrow and Skeevatrons appear again. Each player will have to take one, go down below, and do the same thing to make the boss active again. This rat maze takes place a 2nd time in phase 2, and before you know it, you've gotten through the Stonekeeper that's mysteriously protecting one half of that Wrathstone tablet. The Depths of Molitor dungeon, on the other hand, from a narrative point of view, is pretty much very similar as you deal with Thornya again for the next half of the Wrathstone tablet, only the setting is different. It's located in the Gold Coast in an ancient Aelid ruin. Other than that, Molitor is much easier to run in comparison to Frost Vault. The 5 bosses in here are manageable in pugs, I reckon, and the standout ones for me is the first boss, the Scavenging Maw, that has phases where he disappears around the room and the group must split up in 2s to search for him, and when he's found, he'll start draining the life out of the player who found him, so the second player or whoever's near has to interrupt him. The bosses in between are pretty straightforward, to be honest, and the only other fun fight remaining here is the final boss, the Symphony of Blades. This guy has a brutal AoE that DPS want to watch out for, and the heavy attack the tank has to block. But one cool mechanic that happens in here is the ghost wall, where one of the 4 walls in a room will spawn a line of ghosts, and if not killed, it will one-shot players. DPS here has to kill one of these ghosts to make a gap in this wall to go through. Of course, this was all done on normal, so expect harder mechanics on veteran and hard mode when it comes out. So let's wrap it up with some thoughts of my experiences so far. Overall, just like most of the recent DLC dungeons for the Elder Scrolls Online, the dungeon design, the mechanics, and the flow are all made more challenging and lengthier, and in some cases more interesting than a vast majority of the vanilla game's dungeons, which are just tank and spank keyboard face rolls. The emphasis on learning the fight mechanics I find really neat. I like that kind of stuff, like Frostvault, but the challenge, at least on PTS at the moment, is very high, especially for that last boss where I suspect puck groups on live may just struggle with. That's not a bad thing if you enjoy a good challenge and you have the time to spend in long dungeons or have a consistent group to run with. However, because it's the Season of the Dragon and the entire narrative between DLCs are connected, there may be some folks wondering if they're going to have to get through the hassle of doing these more challenging dungeons to get to the bottom or the beginning of the story. So are these dungeons worth doing, and are they important for the story? I think they're definitely worth doing if you do like Elder Scrolls Online's group content, for sure. Truthfully, the story in here is just the beginnings of how the tablet comes into play, and yes, it does involve you, but there's not much else in here to tie directly into the story beats of the Elsweyr chapter, and you'll get caught up with this DLC's summary of events anyway when you start the Elsweyr chapter prologue, which is also on the PTS at the moment, and that one I won't spoil until it goes live. So when the Wrathstone DLC does come out, and if you're not an ESO Plus member, will it be worth spending 1,500 crowns for the DLC? Yep, if you want more lengthy and challenging dungeons, plus all the new gear sets and achievements, to which I'll link some resources in the description box below. Also on the PTS are all the new racial passives that I highly suggest jumping onto PTS or reading the forums to see what's happening to your main character's race if that matters to you. Otherwise, I personally am looking forward to seeing if my live character can actually survive the Frostvault dungeon, because I know the depths of Molitor will be a breeze. So that's it for me. If you've been on the PTS yourself checking out the Wrathstone DLC, feel free to share your thoughts and experiences. Do you like the new content? Let me know in the comments section below. Hit the like button for more on ESO, and feel free to subscribe to the channel for more videos. Once again, I'm Adrian, and I thank you for watching. For example, people are saying that having dragons, more dragons now on the Elder Scrolls Online is going to be a little lore breaking, because according to most people, there hasn't been a ton of dragons in this time period, and you know, when we play the Elder Scrolls games getting all the way up to Skyrim, it's been mentioned a couple of times that there's only one